Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Word on Coaching podcast. I'm Kevin Fusilier. I'm here with Debbie and Joanne. Joanne and Debbie, say hello.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
We are Coaches three friends with years of leadership and coaching experience who want to share our passion with others. Our podcasts are for leaders, whether you have the formal title or not, that focus on one word that relates to leadership and coaching. We, along with our guests, give you tips, information, sometimes a fresh perspective, and always a lot of support, because we know that leadership can be hard. Today, I'm excited to have one of my best friends, Brent Sadler. We've worked together. We've gone to school together, and we have just done a lot of things. We've taken on some tough projects together. And Brent is someone that you can always go to when you need someone to help you, clarify your thinking. He can take something very complex, he can break it down, and he can turn it into a place where he can actually take some action. When we were thinking about podcast guests, I said we should have Brent on our podcast. So Brent, please give us a little introduction of yourself.
Kevin, thank you so much. And Debbie and Joanne for having me on today. Excited. And Kevin, feel the exact same way. We've been around together and done a lot of things, and from a work standpoint, from a family support standpoint. So really appreciate you. From a leadership and that management perspective, probably in the last 18 years, I worked at State Farm Insurance for about 19 years. I currently work at the Tulsa Area United Way, where I'd volunteered for about 8-9 years prior to. And at one point they asked me just to make a career change and come and work here. I'm the Chief Community Investment Officer for the Tulsa Area United Way. And I have a great opportunity to really be the steward of the process for our community. It's the community dollars that are donated to the United Way. It's community volunteers that make the decision on how those dollars are going to be invested across our community. So I really do have a job that is all about stewardship.
Well, he said it. The word for today, for this episode, is stewardship. And Brent shared with me that his team, they have their values listed on the wall in their office. And the words on that wall are steward, intentional, and performance. And I want Brent to tell us a little bit about those words. I've talked to the people who work for Brent, and they always talk about his approach to leadership and the things that he does. Today, as we look into stewardship, he's a person who has experience and a track record of building strong teams. And that's one of the things when he talks about stewardship, is I know that he feels like he's a steward of the people who work for him. And so I'll let him get into that a little bit more, about him not just talking the talk, but walking the walk.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that, and very proud of the words. And we'll talk a little bit more, I think, later about how those words got there. But just a quick overview, and there's nothing too great, but stewardship in my mind is very simple. It's to hold something in trust for another. And just like I described, the role that we have for investment is to make sure that our stakeholders, being the donors, being the community volunteers, the partner agencies for the United Way, I don't have ownership of that. It's something that we hold in trust for the community, and we help make the best decisions from a stewardship standpoint. Being intentional is exactly what that means. From a team standpoint, we want to be intentional in the decisions that we make collectively in advancing our processes or making decisions. And from a performance standpoint, that's a little bit more there, because I do like the more of the academic aspect of performance, which is a behavior plus a standard. I'll break it down just a little bit. So a behavior is simply an action that can be observed. A standard, however, is a predetermined measure of success. And so it's great in the workplace to do things, but we need folks to perform in the workplace. I need to perform. We need our organization to perform. And so having predetermined measures of success is something that we always want to keep in our mind. The quickest example is typing. And so I'm telling my age at this point because I had typing class when I was a junior in high school. The goal of typing was to type so many words a minute. without a mistake. And so if I was going to a job and the job required me to type 65 words a minute without a mistake, then I can only type 35 words a minute, then I have the behavior of typing, but I can't perform the action that it took to actually do the work. So that's the difference between being able to have a behavior and being able to exert something, but not necessarily meeting it from a performance standpoint, and some other things that go along, with that. I think from a leadership standpoint that it's my job to be the catalyst in helping determine and define measures of success with others. And from a stewardship standpoint, it's not mine to own. It's mine to help gather and hold in trust for others. And so when we talk about those goals, they're not going to be my goals. I'll stop there. Sure, we'll get into
in the right direction because first of all, thank you for that definition. And I love the way you explained your values. I think if leaders did that more often, we probably would have organizations running a lot smoother. First of all, it sounds like you are very much invested in those values. And second of all, it sounds like you not only invest in them, but you live them out. And there's an expectation everybody else does. So I want to commend you for that. So as Kevin said, we're coaches. So tell us how stewardship, because I love that you're bringing that in. How does stewardship relate to being a leader coach?
I think that number one, it's not about me. So from a leadership standpoint, I'm a coach. The first question that I'm going to state is that, it's not about me inside the organization. I'm not going to look to operate from a position of authority. I'm looking to operate from a position of relationship. And I think from a coaching perspective, that's what you're looking to do as a coach and with the folks that you work with. It's the same thing's true from a leadership perspective. When we look at, I have responsibility for folks. I have responsibility for a budget. I have responsibility for some strategic direction, but I don't own what I manage. I think we get confused sometimes. So from a coaching standpoint, I have responsibility, I have accountability, but I separate the ownership aspect of those two things. We've got to do this together. We do it as a team and from a partnership perspective. So from the coaching standpoint, I want to always start with, it's not about me, it's about we. It's about the way we go. And I know that sounds cliche, but I really do believe that that's the place that we start with. And as you're beginning to coach, I think it's asking that internal question of folks, where do you stand? How do you define leadership? What is it that you want to be when you're working with other people? How do you want to be when you're working with others?
Great. Those are great reflection questions for all leaders. And first, I want to tell you, Britt, I got all A's in my typing class in high school every semester. Just want you to know it was my jam. I love so much of what you said. And I feel like so many times leaders do rely too much on what they think is their authority or their title. So I love the focus on you coming from the relationship. And so you've given us a definition. You've talked about this a little bit. And sometimes for people to really understand it, they need to kind of hear a story of how it plays out, right? What it looks like. So do you have a personal story of how you worked on your own stewardship that you would be willing to share with us to let us see what it looks and sounds like?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. I believe from a first management or a first leadership role that I had the opportunity to serve in, and myself and another peer had come up with an idea to implement across the zone. So it was a really large program that almost really became its own standalone thing. We made that pitch. We were provided the opportunity to do the work. It was a process and performance team is what it was. But we needed additional people to work in that space. And the people were going to come from the learning and development department. Those folks were my peers. And so one day we have an idea. The next day we're going to implement that idea. And folks from this group are going to raise their hand to come in and want to be a part of this concept and this idea. So I don't know that I necessarily thought of it as a sense of stewardship at the time, but we had to use the personal motivation, the intrinsic motivation that they had to want to be a part of the group to gain that buy-in. So one day we're friends, one day we're peers. Well, we are the next day as well. And so being able to talk about the work that, yes, some ideas and things came from myself and from a partner and a peer of mine and going forward, but we were going to do this work together because we had already done work together. So this concept and this idea of using a personal power versus a positional power that oftentimes in leadership you get or you gain wasn't there. And so we had to approach it. We had to move things forward and move it relatively quickly and to gain it that way. So that's kind of the first part. When I came to the United Way, there was a little discontinuity on the team. And one of the things that I was able to do was to speak to these concepts and the things that I'd learned before with this team. And it was that this whole concept of stewardship, that we don't own, that's not our money. We're not making the decision. We are in a position to hold these things in trust for other people. And it's our job to do that. We manage knowledge for people, give it to them so that they can make decisions, better decisions for our community. So I think it was born in a place out of necessity because I didn't really have the positional component. But as I went through the leadership journey, as I transitioned into a whole nother organization and a whole nother team, those concepts continue to resonate. And that's, we also discussed, we did this within the first week that I was here, that we sat down and said, this is what we're going to be about. We're going to be about this as a business unit. We're going to be stewards. We're going to be intentional. And we're going to apply concepts of performance that include a standard of the way that we're going to choose to work. I think anyone that's been in the leadership role and that kind of thing, sometimes you back into some things. Maybe I backed into this one. I don't know. But I believe it's always just been the approach that I've taken. It's just really asking the question, it's not about me. And how do we do these things together?
Tell me, Brent, where does stewardship come from? Does it come from your heart or come from your head?
I think it comes from both. And I think for me, it comes from a faith perspective. It comes from church. It comes from where I was raised. It comes from rural Oklahoma, I think. And, some of the things that was exposed to. So I do think there's heart component to it. But I also think there's a lot of process and a lot of organizational aspect to it. I believe that, again, my role as a leader is to plan and set goals that produce value for the organization, whether it would be State Farm and United Way, and then to work to achieve those goals. But I believe that my job is to establish effective pathways to achieve those organizational goals. And the way that we go about achieving those pathways is to work with people. Sometimes it's going to be through coaching. Sometimes it's going to be through consultation. Sometimes it's going to have to be through some form of management. But the spirit of which we approach those things always is about the stewardship aspect of holding my responsibility and trust for those that I work with and the organization at the same time. So I believe that coaching, consulting, and managing are also a part of this. And we can blend those things together as long as we hold the spirit of, it's not about me. It's about we, it's about others. And it's the way that I can choose to impact other people's goals from a pathway standpoint and how we achieve those for the organization.
How does a leader become a better steward? And what things should they focus on to practice stewardship?
I think the first time, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit and had lots of visits from individuals that would come to my office and say, I want to go into leadership. And the first question is, why? So what is it why do you want to go into leadership? What is it that you want to do? And so many people don't necessarily able to articulate really what it is that they want to do and how they want to go about it. As far as being a steward, one of the first things I want to know and I want to hear is that I want to do this to better others. I want to do this to help the organization. There are intrinsic rewards to being in leadership, and that's okay. That's fine. But I also want to hear a lot about the intrinsic aspect of this. What, from a learning standpoint, from a development, how am I going to help other people? How am I going to be able to wrap around, maybe it's a form of subject matter expertise, which I call consulting. How do you use that? But if I want to be a good steward, I want to hear how I want to approach things from that the intrinsic value, and check my self-interest as much as I can. So from a coaching standpoint, those are the questions I would want to ask. Why do you want to do this? I mean, really simple, and just listen to the response. And I know that's incredibly simple and probably coaching 101, but be pretty surprised at having those conversations and not being able to necessarily articulate that.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many, that's one of my first questions I ask when I start working with leaders is why leadership? I can't tell you how many people are like, will say, I've never thought about that, or I've never been asked that. And they're already in a leadership role. So it always surprises me. And I really think you need to think about that, right? Like you need to have that why in your head. So would you say stewardship is just for leaders?
No, I think if we're going to think about things from a stewardship, if we're going to hold things in trust, we're holding things in trust for one another. And that requires a relationship, that requires a partnership. I have that conversation. We talk about that on our team. Is I'm not really interested in the management aspect or the micromanagement aspect of things. And let me place a caveat on this. From my leadership journey, I've been able to make selections, choose folks in a lot of ways and a lot of times. So we're able to have these conversations that I'm able to select people that have the right, what I call the right mindset, which is one about collective and stewardship, but also some subject matter expertise that they're able to bring to the team in order to advance us on the pathways for goal achievement. But it's about the partnership. So yeah, it's for everybody, because if you're looking to me to direct and to guide everything, that just doesn't work. I mean, it has to be you have to own that direction as well. Part of my goal is to help with that development, to help find those pathways, to help remove obstacles and pathways on the way to goals. And I think that those are part of my ownership and my responsibility. One of the things that I don't care for, no one can say they work for me. That's not something that I let go. I say, well, I work for Brent, or no, we work for the organization. We work for the goals and the mission that the organization supports. If you work for me, what you're speaking to is some form of ownership. And that's not really what I want. I want us to be on this together from a partnership perspective, because we're holding this in trust with each other. So it's not just for me, it's for everyone to be able to advance and think about going forward.
So when you're moving people from that me to we aspect of things, how do you support, as a leader coach, how do you support someone in becoming a steward or even shifting to that mindset?
Well, like I said, I mean, if I'm hiring folks, I'm listening for it right up front. I'm listening for those kinds of thought processes. I'm listening for the way that they describe in the answers. I want to hear the way that they're sharing that information. Now, I've had instances where I've had teams where people, maybe some folks were already there. If their self-interest is too great and they don't want to really be part of the team, then I've had it happen a couple of times, they will self-select out. I want everyone to be successful. So let's find the best place for you to be successful. And again, I think that's, trying to hold that trust for those individuals. This might not be the best opportunity.
Well, what if I'm one of those folks who are really trying, but there's things in my way, there's barriers. First of all, what are some barriers that you see for folks, and how would you help them overcome them?
Yeah, so I think that, especially as we're learning things and working in organizations, and certainly when you're when we're younger. We don't necessarily know how to navigate. There may be subject matter that we don't necessarily understand or to know. And from that standpoint, it does take the consultative thought process. There are things that I can help, that maybe I've done these things before. When I flip the hat from coach to consultant, then I'm able to help them understand this may be a way you can accomplish X. And so try to use some subject matter expertise from that standpoint. And that's okay. I mean, that's part of the job as well, is to help people get from one place to the next. So I think we see it a lot with, if you don't know the answers, you don't know how to operate. Maybe it's your first job. You want to get in, you want to do well, but you don't really know a whole lot. That's okay too. I mean, again, I think from a stewardship standpoint, we're holding the development of that person in trust. So that, again, that's part of that responsibility is to help that individual grow, to identify what it is that they can do and do differently, and try to get them to own that space, number one, and to give that development, to them. That's something I do talk about is development. I do believe that development is the responsibility of the person. I'm here to help with the pathways. I'm here to help with opportunity or maybe resources to help with it. I've had some instances where people will come and, you're not developing me. I don't know that's completely the role of the manager and of the leader without the insights and support of the person that wants the development. And what are you willing to do at the end of the day, for yourself? So I want to help provide the resources, and I want to be able to help and support that. But I want to do it without being the caregiver. I don't want the patriarchal aspect of this either. I want them to be able to own that component. So I think sometimes in leadership, we get to this ownership component, this responsibility that I'm a caregiver of people. Well, I think that's too patriarchal. I don't think that's a good thing. I think we got to own this together. We've got to be in partnership to work that development, going forward. Really, I mean, together, but it's really your responsibility.
There may be some folks who are listening that's maybe not ever thought about stewardship as part of their role, especially as a leader coach. So what is one thing that you would recommend for folks who's like, I get what you're saying, and I really want to become a steward or maybe a better steward. What is one thing that you would suggest that someone who really wants to step into that role do?
Yeah, I think you have to ask, first of all, you have to have the statement that it's not about me. And then you have to answer the question, then what is this about? And answer those questions honestly for yourself. It's okay, whatever the answer is. But I think that's the discovery component of where you're going to find where you're going to stand in that leadership journey. You have to be able to ask the question of, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to be a leader? And if it's about me, I need to understand that and going forward. If it's about the self-interest in those things, then it's probably not going to be the stewardship role at first. But I believe that many, many leaders, I think we do get to that place where it's not about me. It's about others, and how do we advance it and help from our perspective to advance things with other people.
I like that framework. If it's not about me, then what is it about? Thinking about that from how you lead, how you work, how you collaborate. What is this really about? I've been in corporate America in different roles in different organizations. And when I think about people really coming together to get things done, we've done our best work when we really had our eyes focused on something much, much bigger than us as individuals or even our team, and that we were owning something for the organization. So I can definitely see how stewardship would come into play in that. And I appreciate that about the mindset of being a good steward. And we appreciate your insights. But before we let you go today, we have 3 questions. And we promise they won't be very hard questions. But we do want to know your answers. So the first one is, what is a book that you think a leader coach should read?
Well, I do have a propensity for the academic, so I'm going to give you the academic book. It's the North House Leadership Theory and Practice. And the reason I would say that is because it's really a pretty easy read the way that it's laid out. And it has different measurements, different scales, different things that you can test out for yourself to see what things might look like. It probably gives a bit of a history from a leadership standpoint, kind of where things looked and going forward. And the reason I think that it's an important book is because it's really asking the leadership question and trying to understand the why you want to be into leadership and where you might fall. You might be transactional, you might be authentic, you may be trait, it may be more like a trait or the great man leadership thought process. If you believe that, keep reading the book. There's going to be more that you're going to need to know about leadership at the end of the day. So it's an academic, but it's a very accessible and easy read.
Thank you very much. That book, I can give it a thumbs up also. It's a must read for people who aspire and then even people who want to be in leadership. The next question is about questions, Brent. So what question have you been asked that gave you pause, made you stop and think a little bit deeper or a little differently?
Oh man, I know we're talking about leadership, but I think the biggest question I was asked in the workplace was when I had my supervisor come to me and say, we would like for you to consider a role. Would you like to be in leadership? And so these responses and these things I've tried to be a student of this work, to try to understand. Like I said, I was a little bit later in coming probably to management. I didn't start a job and just immediately get thrust into, leadership role. I worked in an organization for quite some time. I've seen a lot of leaders, good, bad, different things that we'd want to do. And I didn't know if it was something I necessarily wanted to do. And so to be approached with it and for it was really one of the things that I had to think about the deepest, because I think I really understood how important it was that what I do impacts other people. And the way that I behave, the way that I lead, the way that I think impacts others. And I want them to be along in that journey. I'm not looking to abdicate any responsibility from a stewardship standpoint and saying that it's about the we. I understand that the leadership role is important, and the way that it's been established and defined for us, it really is about that ownership and looking to somebody to do something. So it was really significant for me to have to stop and say, do I want to do this? Can I do this? Can I be somebody that can do this with others? Because that's what the job is, doing with and through other folks to achieve organizational goals.
That's interesting. The pause and think, do I want to be a leader? Sounds like from what Debbie said, maybe some other people should take some pause and reflect on that question. And the last question, this is an easy one. What is your word on coaching?
You got to know what it is. I would say you need to know what coaching is and what coaching is not. And I think that I think that's a really important thing. It's not counseling. It's not mentoring. It's not consultation. That's subject matter expertise. It can be some form of feedback, but understand what it is. And then there are many different definitions, but define it for yourself, know what it is. If you're getting into a coaching relationship, if you are a coach, make sure it's defined and share that definition with other people. There's been lots of instances and things that I've heard and talked about folks that really what they're wanting to do is be a mentor. and they're wanting to share experiences and they want to share life. And those can be outstanding relationships, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when I think about a word on coaching, it is to know what it is.
Well, we will take that, to know what it is. Well, thank you, Brent, for sharing your subject matter expertise, your wisdom, your insights. It's been a pleasure. And Debbie, Joanne, do you have any final words?
Just a big thank you. And I'm going to take some of this stuff and talk to the people that I support, other leaders, and ask them some of these questions. And I think a lot of people need to look, are they good stewards? And so thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I just also will add my thanks, Brent. And words like ownership and trust are floating around in my head. But I think the big thing is know your why, right? I think that's the big thing that is really standing out for me. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Thanks to our audience for listening. Check out more of our Word on Coaching podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. One thing that we're really excited about right now is our book is coming out next month.
Yeah.
So that'll be June of 2022. Please connect with us on Facebook at Coaches3. We have a Facebook page. And until next time, that is the Word on Coaching.